Okay.
Ready? Okay. We're here with Mildred Armstrong Kalish, who was born on St. Patrick's Day in 1922 on a farm near Garrison, Iowa in Benton County. Millie, as she's known to her friends, is a writer, author of Little Heathens, a memoir of growing up in Iowa during the Great Depression. She has taught English at several East Coast colleges and at the State University of Iowa in Iowa City. She is the mother of 2, the grandmother of 4, the great-grandmother of 2, and she is a product of a one-room schoolhouse education back in Iowa. Today's date, for the record, is January 17th, 2011. We are speaking with Millie at the Palo Alto home of her son and daughter-in-law, Doug Kalish and Donna Bowling. And we're going to talk about her experiences as a student in a one-room schoolhouse. It was known as Monroe No. 6. And you can read more about it in Chapter 17 of Little Heathens, but today we have Millie herself to tell us about it. So we'll proceed with the interview.
Just one addition. I taught also at the University of Missouri at Columbus.
Okay.
Which I like. I like to put that in.
So you took what you learned in one-room schoolhouses and you spread it throughout the Midwest. Actually, throughout the whole country.
That's right.
I wanted to start with some facts and figures and numbers so we know where we were and when we were there before we get into some of the more qualitative questions about one-room schoolhouses, okay?
Are you going to use this?
I'm going to use the questions, but not in order.
Okay, okay. All right.
So we're going out of order.
Okay.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, what years about were you at Monroe No. 6?
Roughly between 1928 and 1936.
Okay, and what grades were that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But yeah, I have to qualify this. You can't talk about rural schools in Iowa during the 30s without talking also about the weather and the Depression. And that's an important thing because it enveloped our lives and it controlled our lives, actually. Those two things, the weather and the Depression, the Great Depression. Now, the Depression was worldwide, and it cast a pall over everything we did. It controlled everything we did. It not controlled, but it did permeate everything that we did. A little more about that. It just happened. See, when I started to in rural school, I came from a fatherless family, and my mother and her 4 children, my 2 brothers and my sister, my baby sister, came to live with my grandparents, who lived in Garrison, and they had just retired. And because of the terrible weather, we lived on the farm only from May until Christmas. And then at Christmas time, we bundled everything up and went into town and lived with Grandpa and Grandma and went to this little school in Garrison.
So Monroe No. 6, where was that? Was that in town or in the country?
Monroe No. 6 is the rural school in town. And it's called Monroe because we lived in Monroe Township. We lived in Iowa, in Benton County, in Monroe Township. And each township, every 2 miles, was a rural school. I don't know how many there were at that time, but if you lived on a certain side of the road, you went to Monroe No. 7. If you lived on the opposite side, it was known Monroe No. 6. And we lived on the right across the road from my cousins. And this is so rare that I cannot name you. I cannot think of in that entire county another time when 2 farmhouses were that close. Usually they were at least a half a mile, maybe 2 miles apart.
And you went to different schools?
And my cousins who lived on the south side of the road went to Monroe No. 7, and my we went to Monroe number 6. Now that meant that Harold and Dean and Robert walked up to the corner and turned left, and they went south, so that the northern wind was at their backs. We went up, if we went by the road, up to the corner, and we left them and we turned north and had to face the north winds. And because of the severity of the weather at that time, they felt that it was too dangerous for us to face those north winds, because if you want to look at this is an
So tell me what months these are. What months of the year?
The months of the year, we went to town school from Christmas until May 18th. May 18th is corn planting day, which means all the schools have to be out because the kids were needed on the farm. And we started school right after Labor Day, the first day after Labor Day, and we went till Christmas. And that meant that you had one semester, we had one semester on the farm, going into the north winds, and then the other semester in the spring with Grandpa and Grandma in the Garrison School, which had all 12 grades from one, and all under one roof.
So in the winter, you were in Monroe number 6. It was really cold, and
Yes.
that was the one-room schoolhouse.
Yes.
And the semester started when, after Labor Day?
After Labor Day, but what you have to remember is that the winter, the worst of the winter began in January, February, and March. But we also had, in those days, and this has changed now, we had winter beginning sometimes at the end of October. But the weather was so varying at that time that I remember on Thanksgiving Day that the boys were out lying in their shirt sleeves on the lawn. It's that picture I have in Little Heathens of all my cousins and brothers, a good number of them, are lying out on the lawn to bask in the sun, waiting for dinner to come. So that we had unbelievably blissful, the only word I can think of is halcyon, days in September and October. There's a poem. We learn lots of poetry in country school, and that's one of the things that I am so happy I did. There's a poem. There are two poems, and one is, "Oh, what is so rare as a day in June? Then, if ever, are perfect days. Then heaven tries earth if she be in tune, and over her softly her warm ear lays." And then there's the counter. "O sun and moon and flowers of June, and all the stars together, all the birds together, ye cannot equal for 1 hour October's bright blue weather."
Well, that's beautiful. Now, did your teacher teach you that in school?
Yes. And I got to tell you, going to country school, easily as important as the school were the walks to country school. That walking, and every child I have ever encountered who's been to country school, remember the walks to country school.
So how far was it? How far was it from the house?
If we went the road, walking with our cousins up to the road, up to the corners where we split and went to Monroe number 6 and Monroe 3, that was 1.5 miles. If we went between 1.5 miles and 1.25 miles, and if we went through the pastures, through the hazel brush, and along the creek, it was 1 mile.
And how long did that take you, your kids, so you could move fast?
Yes, but it depended. You see, that was why I say the walks to school were easily as educational as the education we got in Monroe School, because when you say how long did it take, it depended on what was fun that day. Oh. We would walk, and as we walked, and this I think is part of the great fun of rural school and the value. The big kids taught us, there's a rabbit sitting over there. He's frozen, and he's still, just walk right by him. And they would say, there's a ground squirrel picking his head up. and they would say, there's a bobolink, hear the bobolink. Or there's a bluebird building its nest in the oak fence post. Or there's a pheasant. And we knew, I mean, you learn so much about nature, like for instance, on pheasants. Pheasants are the big ringnecks, the one I'm talking about, the handsome, colorful bird. The pheasant will fly, because they'll wait till you're right there, and then they'll flutter you up so that you're too scared to pull a gun up, if you had a gun, which of course we didn't. But the pheasants will fly up, and with a great flutter, and then they'll drop down in a weed, say a stubble field. And if you think you're going over there and find that pheasant, you are so wrong. Because the first thing a pheasant will do is tuck his head down and run along the ground.
And this happened on a walk to school?
Yes. And you would see killdeer on the slope.
What's a killdeer?
A killdeer is a handsome, small bird that lives by the water, the ring that around his neck, kind of a tiny bird. And he says, killdeer, killdeer, killdeer. And if you get close, anywhere close to his nest, and this, you see, the big kids taught us this. If you get close to it, the killdeer will go into a mode as if it's totally crippled. And it will hang its leg back in its wing and act as if it's going to die and pull you away in the opposite place of his nest. So if you want to find a killdeer's nest, you don't follow the killdeer, you go back here, because that's where the nest is.
Okay, so you're walking along. Who's walking with you? You said big kids and little kids. How many kids are walking to school together?
Yes, this depends again. If it's just us, if we're going through the field, we are walking with Ossie Pingenot, who was from the family a half a mile up the road east of us. And Ossie was an orphan. No, he wasn't an orphan. His mother just abandoned the whole family. Kind of like Horton hatches the egg, you know. His mother abandoned the family, and the relatives each took a child, and Ossie was taken by the Irwin family.
And how old was Ossie?
Ossie was about 7.
And how old are you?
By this time, I'm about the same age,
okay.
7 or 8 years old. And he would come down.
And you're little kids? You're little kids?
We're still little kids
okay.
at that time.
What
is the cusp. 8 to 9 is the cusp. You don't want to be on that.
Okay.
Because you're neither a big kid nor a little kid, and that puts you in danger, because nobody likes you.
Okay, so what grade are you in if you're 8?
Third.
Third, okay. Got
it. And so we would find things to do, either going to school or coming home. So you would expect, the folks would expect us home by, say, the folks would expect us home by 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'd leave school at 8 in the morning, and then we would get to school by 8:30 or 8:40, mm-hmm. and you like to get there early because you could play with the kids. Mm-hmm. And playing with the rest of the kids was terribly important because we were so isolated, you know. And so getting there and playing pom pom pull away and all of our games.
Okay, what's pom pom pull away?
Pom pom pull away.
Let's play it right now. What is it?
Pom pom pull away is you have to stand. You stand by a post, and I'm trying to remember. Not exactly. You can hardly remember how we played pom pom pull away. You'd stand by a post. And the rest of the kids would say, pom pom pull away, come away, or we'll pull you away. And they had to run to another post. And they had to dodge you, and you had to touch him. And if the person who touched him got to be the one at the...
Okay, so it's kind of like Taggart, but a little more complicated. And where were these posts? Were they in the school yard?
We had one hitching post, and then another thing that dealt with the post was the corner post of the schoolyard. Which fenced us in. All schoolyards were fenced in on at least 3 sides, probably never 4, but 3 sides. And the fences were woven wire fences with the top one of barbed wire that went around. But you would run from the hitching post to the
So before you get into the building and into the classroom, I want to ask a few more questions about that walk. What are you carrying when you're walking to school?
Oh, that's terribly important. We're carrying dinner pails, or dinner buckets, or lunch pails, whichever. We called ours dinner pails. Some kids called them lunch pails, or we called them dinner buckets. And they were a variety of dinner pails. Dinner, of course, in the farm is the noonday. And our dinner pails were old, emptied molasses or sorghum, a gallon about this high, with a wire bale over the top. And that was enough for 2 people, but we had a half a gallon corn syrup, and the corn syrup was white, which we had both sorghum and molasses, which was dark.
So it's made out of tin?
10 pails. 10 pails with a bale.
Okay.
10 pails with a wire bale.
Okay. And is it a white tin pail or metal looking?
Metal. And the white syrup pail was a half a gallon, tin pail with a bale. The sorghum and the molasses were gallon pails. And some kids who were wealthy and better off than we were, had long, oblong, real dinner buckets. And they were oblong, and they had a black, and they had a curved top, and in that curved top was a real vacuum bottle.
Oh my goodness.
A real vacuum bottle. And that was fine until they dropped it, and it was glass inside, and they'd smash it to smithereens. But in that dinner pail.
Now, did you have your name on the dinner pail, or it didn't matter?
No, everybody knew.
Okay.
Everybody knew. Everybody knew whose was whose. The dinner pail, okay, and so much is flooding in at this point, I don't know quite where to start. Because it occurs to me how nice the big kids were to us little kids as we walked in the snow. They would carry our dinner buckets, because little kids would drag ours in the snow. Anyway, that's
so tell me what's in the bucket.
In the bucket is always a sandwich, and the sandwich would have been made of homemade bread, fried pork tenderloin, with homemade chili, which is the equivalent of salsa. Tastes exactly like salsa without the comino seed.
Right.
Because we didn't have comino, but we had red peppers, green peppers, tomatoes, and cinnamon.
Oh, sounds delicious.
It was absolutely fantastic. We would have had sometimes sliced beef, cold sliced pork. So these are sandwiches. You'd have perhaps a cupcake, a couple of either walnut cookies, oatmeal cookies, sugar cookies, applesauce cake. You'd have that, and sometimes a slice of apple pie or not gooseberry at that time of the year. We would have cherries, ground cherries.
So did you trade your lunches? Were the Armstrong lunches better than the other kids' lunches?
Well, it depended. The thing that we all absolutely craved and would trade our grandmothers for, including our lunch, were peanut butter sandwiches on this awful Wonder Bread. Wonder Bread was coveted by all, and I think of it, it couldn't hold a candle to our homemade bread when I think of how we would trade this marvelous, nourishing, whole wheat, homemade bread, crusty and crisp and flavorful, to this awful Wonder Bread.
So what was the appeal of the Wonder Bread?
It had peanut butter. It was store-bought.
Oh, store-bought. Okay.
Anything store-bought is superior to homemade. And it had peanut butter in it. Peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter and grape jelly sandwiches. And that was, you trade your eye teeth for that.
What was the teacher?
Hold it.
Okay, so we were talking about sandwiches and lunches, and we both said we can hardly wait for lunch, and that's something that continues to this day. We still like lunch. I wanted to ask what the teacher would have for lunch. Do you remember?
Oh, yes. The teacher, because the teacher lived with a family that lived but about a quarter of a mile from the house, from the schoolhouse. She had the same thing that the two kids had. That was Beverly and Harold Moore. And she would have the same kind of things. She'd just have, her lunch was exactly like ours. As far as I know, I never saw any teacher drink coffee. But all of us took chocolate milk. And some of them had little tiny fancy aluminum containers. And we had glass containers for our chocolate milk. Nearly everybody took some kind of milk or chocolate milk. Chocolate milk was the most favorite. And let's see, something popped into my mind at that time.
Well, first, do you remember the teacher's name?
Oh, I remember all my teachers' names.
So why don't we say the teachers' names in case their families are still in Iowa?
Miss Sturtz was my first teacher.
Sturtz?
Sturtz, S-T-U-R-T-Z.
Okay.
I was wildly in love with Miss Sturtz and Miss Ellers and Miss Zimmer, who was my favorite teacher of all time. We should talk about Miss Zimmer.
Okay.
Miss Zimmer, Miss Axtell. Did I say Miss Ellers?
Yes.
I think that's all they had.
Okay.
Those
you
were
still remember them all these years?
Oh yeah, and then the Garrison School. In first grade, I had Miss Wyman. In second and first and second grade, I had Miss Wyman. In third and fourth, I had Miss Buffington. In fifth and sixth, I had Miss Boyer. In seventh, I had Mr. Elmo Urice, and then Bernard McElrath, who all us girls fell in love with. He's our 8th grade teacher.
How did you get some men in the mix? I thought it was mostly...
That was town school.
And
that was Garrison School. No males, no male teachers in Monroe at that time. And while we're at it, this flashed in my mind, and I'd like to put it out. And that is, when my mother was teaching, she got about $32 a month. And when I called my friend Nadine Bolt, who started to teach rural school in Iowa in 1942, and she made $125 a month teaching rural school. And now that's up in the Mount Auburn region, and Mount Auburn is still in Benton County. But then she got a $1 extra for every student over the number of 10. So she had 12 students, so that meant she got $127 a month. And that's kind of important, I think, now.
It's hard for me to know in dollars what that meant during Depression time.
Yes.
You know, what the equivalent would be. Now, your mother made...
Well, no, and I'm not sure that I can tell you, except that you could buy what we called weenies, what we now call frankfurters. We got 12 cents a dozen, and we paid 10 cents a loaf for a big loaf of bread, of Wonder Bread. That cost 10 cents. And then there was a mini 5-cent loaf, as I recall.
What year are we talking about?
Now we're talking about 32, 1932 probably. And so I remember that in 1938, 1940, I bought a sweater for 80 cents. A really pretty sweater. It was pink and white and looked nice on me.
Like a woolen? Or
yes, it was kind of like a wool, but it was fuzzy. And it was long wool, and I remember paying 80 cents for that. And
okay, but let's bring it back. Let's go back to school. Let's go back to school. We're not in the schoolhouse yet. We played games. We carried our lunch.
Yes.
We talked about some of the things. Maybe we didn't talk about. Are you carrying your books, or are all the books in the building?
Generally, we didn't take more than one book home. Okay. There was very little homework. Just some, and only when the thing is that all my teachers had lots of programs, and they were really productions. And we would learn poems. I remember that in our family, but the four of us had 9 poems to present. And so you would learn your piece, we called it. You'd say your piece. And that was a poem that you learned. And
let me ask you a question about, well, okay, we're off the topic a little bit. Public speaking apparently was very important back then in the one-room schoolhouse. They really wanted you to learn how to do that. I don't know if it's as important in school now. We have debate teams, but it's not really part of the curriculum. Why do you think that was? Why was that important?
I'll tell you one of the reasons it's important. Because you had no television, and we didn't even have a radio except one that the boys made, you know, with a battery and an antenna up on the roof, and you were so isolated, and you had to create your own fun. And when your relatives came to visit, you said your piece. You recited the poem that you learned in school that week. And each person would stand up and say, okay, now John, you say your piece. Or you would play. When I was about 12, I guess I was 13, when I got a guitar, I'd play the guitar for them. Or when we were in town with the piano, you'd play your simple little piano that you'd learned that. So that it was a part of entertainment. And it was the enjoyment. And like when, for instance, we went down to Aunt Belle's, everybody, we always would say poetry.
How would the teacher teach you? Would she tell you to memorize it?
Generally, she teaches they take it home and learn it at home tonight. And that was the homework. A lot of that was the homework. And of course, as I said, our family loved it, and we loved it, and so we did. I learned poems. I still remember. I can't get over the number of poems that I still remember. I was just looking in this book, and there's a book. Hats off! Along the street there comes a blur of bugles, a ruffle of drums, a flash of color beneath the sky. Hats off! The flag is passing by. You know, and it's in that book. I remember it.
Now, did you have assemblies or performances at school?
Well, yes, those were the programs. Let me explain the programs, because they're very important. That brought the community together. The programs. We had a Halloween program, and we had a Thanksgiving program, we had a Christmas program, and I don't know whether they had, I'm sure they had an Easter program, but see, I never, ever went to country school in the spring. Right. So I missed all of that in there. But this brought the community together, and we had box socials. Nearly all of these were box socials, and what we would do is each family would decorate a box, and the housewife would make a wonderful pie, always great fried chicken. Or maybe pork tenderloins, whatever, something like that. Potato salad, macaroni salad, fresh rolls that she would bake. They would be yeast rolls that she would bake, and they'd bring butter, they'd make coffee. And then the farmer, it's supposed to be kept a secret. Of course, nearly every housewife told her husband, now you bid on this one because this has got my stuff in it. But the young men and the young ladies, the young men would always think they'd want to bid on their girlfriends, and that was kind of a secret.
So you bid on this meal,
yeah,
and then you'd eat the meal with the person.
With the person who purchased, and the highest bidder.
And was the money a fundraiser?
The money was a fundraiser, and we paid the piano tuner with that money. We bought, I think they bought coal with that money. Right. We bought a phonograph, and of all things, let me tell you this, we bought a hectograph.
I don't know what that is.
You don't know what a hectograph is. A hectograph is about a 24-inch long box, and it's only about 8 inches high. And on that, and it's about 12 to 14, 12 inches in width. And it has a layer, it has an open face, and it has a layer of a gelatinous material on it. And the teacher would take a crayon of some sort, and I can't remember, she must have dipped it in something, to draw pictures or make up a test. And he would put this on a sheet of paper, and he would lay it on the hectograph, and you could pull, say, 10 copies from that.
Oh, it was like an early photocopier.
Yeah.
or a Xerox machine, or a mimeograph.
It's
a hectograph.
A hectograph. And it was the forerunner, and every once in a while the thing would stick, and you could pull out a little blob of the jelly, and you'd have to pat it down.
So was this for your assignments or for illustrations?
This was for many things, assignments, and if we had songs we had to learn, she would do the songs on it. But most of all, she would let us draw pictures.
Oh, that must have been exciting.
And I was a pretty good artist in those days. And if you got your work done, then you could draw pictures. And then.
So what would you draw? What kind of pictures?
I remember, I drew pictures of undersea. I wonder why I did that. I don't know.
Because you weren't near a beach or anything.
No, but I drew pictures of undersea and starfish and ducks swimming on the water. I especially love ducks because then, you see what you did, you just would outline this, and then you would give them to people and take them to desk and color them.
Oh, that's great.
And it would occupy you for about an hour.
That's great.
It was
I've never heard of a hectograph before. I bet you the museum probably has one.
You know, I don't think the museum, the rural school in northern Iowa has a hectograph. That's something we should tell Sue.
Right.
To look for a hectograph.
So you had a lot of technology in that. You had a Victrola.
We had a Victrola.
Tell people. I know what a Victrola is, but maybe younger people don't.
It's a phonograph.
But describe what it looked like.
It's about 18 inches by 18. It's portable.
Right.
18 inches by 18 inches by about 10 inches, and it had an arm with a needle in it, and it had a lid to cover this. Because then when you want to use it, you pull the lid back, had 2 hinges here, and then you would put I think those were 45.
Right. Or maybe there were the bigger ones. I don't remember them.
My memory is that they must have been the 45 revolutions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would gently put the needle, and it had a little magnaphone in it, and it would sing, and it would play. And I remember especially in music class, we used that in music class.
So what did you listen to? What kind of music did you
Madame
listen to?
Schumann-Heine playing Hear the Gentle Lark.
Madame Schumann. Who was Madame Schumann-Heine?
Everybody then knew she was a singer that everybody was supposed to know, and she was held up as a model.
Was she an American singer or a German singer or
I think German.
And it was "Oh Hear the Gentle."
Oh, hear the gentle lark. And we were supposed to mimic her, of course.
Wow.
And then we had when this Fullerton book came out, which was in 1932, this book all 4 of us used, and you could see it, but I'm so happy I still have it. Came out in 1932. And
okay, I'm just going to read it. It is a 1-book course in elementary music and selected songs for schools by Charles Fullerton. There's a harp on the cover, or a lyre, or a lyre, I don't know how to say it. And so you still own this. It says Mildred L. Armstrong, and 1924, and then it says John Armstrong. That was your brother?
Yeah,
Francis and John Armstrong.
Yeah, Francis is Jack.
Okay.
Those are my 2 older brothers.
And oh my goodness. Okay, and it's Cedar Falls, Iowa, February 3rd, 1931. And I'm just going to read Can I read the first paragraph just so we have it on here? The part that imitation plays in the early education of the child has been undervalued by too many teachers. The 5-year-old child that comes to school his first day with a working vocabulary of, say, 1,000 words, nearly all of which he has learned unaided by imitation, has made an astonishing record in contrast with the results of the calculating, analytical procedure by which teachers use to hamper him as soon as he's arrived in the school. It is natural for a child to learn music by imitation as to learn language by imitation, but generally the opportunities for learning music have not been so favorable at home. The result is that the majority of children learn to do their first accurate singing in school. That's pretty neat. And that is 1931.
And he wanted to make Iowa the singingest school in the nation. I remember that quote. I'm not sure where I heard it, but I do remember that saying that Fullerton wanted to make that. And this book has just got the greatest songs in it, like Genevieve, you know, and Beside the Linden Tree. It has all those great old songs.
Well, you know, now we're in 2011 as we speak here, and there's a lot of arguments for music education in the schools.
Oh, you know,
I think it's interesting that you did it back.
Yes.
It's interesting that you did it back then.
Yeah. And we had a piano. We had an upright piano. Don't forget.
And who played?
The teacher. Teacher played the upright piano, and she also sang in there. And Miss Axtell had a very milky, thin voice that nearly everybody could sing better than she could. But she tried.
So one of the things I wanted to do, I mean, you have so many years of education that
Yes.
you could go each grade, but you said that Miss Zimmer was your favorite?
Miss Zimmer was by and far.
Okay, so let's talk about Miss Zimmer since she was your favorite.
Miss Sturts was my first teacher, and I fell in love with her first. And it was then that I decided I'd be a teacher.
Miss Dirks?
Miss Sturts.
Sturts, okay, she was your first teacher.
And she was my first, and I was crazy about her.
Her too.
And she taught for 2 years. And then I think she passed away of a burst appendix.
Oh, which people did back then.
Yes, they did back then.
All right, let's talk about Miss Zimmer first, and then we can go back to Miss Zimmer. What grade was that?
Miss Zimmer was about, I must have been 5th and 6th grade by then. I think 5th and 6th grade, because Miss Zimmer, first of all, she was beautiful. She had pink, like a china doll's skin, and blue eyes, and light brown hair. And she was sweet. She had a smile all of the time.
And what would a teacher wear? What would the teacher's attire be?
Teacher would just be a plain dress. And oh, there's something I should mention. Probably when we get to the winter stuff, girls were not permitted to wear pants or trousers in those days, and that's a big thing. Right. Remind me when we get to the winter dress. Well, that was wicked. Anyway.
And what kind of shoes? What kind of shoes would she wear?
She would wear sensible shoes.
What was a sensible shoe?
Sensible shoes is what we call social workers' shoes. A leather shoe that would have probably 6 eyes on top on each side and laced up, or she would have simply a slipper where the foot would be slipped into. But she never wore high-top shoes the way little children did. She never wore those. And she always looked pretty. She was always fresh. All the teachers were that.
So how would she start the day? Did she show up to heat up the stove? Was that a thing?
Well, she got there before we did. That was a requirement, that the school be warm by the time we got there. So the teacher, you see, the teachers were not only teachers, they were nurses, they were janitors, they were arbiters, they were policemen. What else were they? Teachers were just all around. Everything was required of a teacher. It is unbelievable that a teacher would come to school at 8 in the morning, build her own fire with sticks, and sometimes they would have kerosene cobs to help them, and stay with 12 to 17 children all day, teaching anywhere from 5 to 8 grades all day. He'd come out to play at recess with us, eat lunch with, sit around when the weather was this halcyon Indian summer weather, come out and sit in a circle with us and eat lunch with us and chat with us and make jokes. Then come back in and teach all up till 4 o'clock, or we'd have an afternoon recess. And then after that, well, of course, our teachers all did the Tom Sawyer trick of tidying up the school at the end of the day, and especially Friday. Are you glad to help out? You look, we're happy to help out. And she, as I say, being a janitor was part of what she did. So she was everything.
Did you respect your teacher?
Oh my! Respect them. We thought they were we thought they were queens. And that was another thing. The punishment. I never saw a teacher whack a kid with a ruler. In those days, first of all, the teacher knew the family. The teacher got acquainted with the parents, and through these programs and so on that we had, and they knew the parents. Everybody respected the teachers and the parents. And I mean, it was just a saying, you get a licking at school, you'll get another one when you get home. And the teacher was always right. There was just no question the teacher would be backed up. And the punishment was, first of all, let me tell you what you might do to get punished. If you whispered when another student was trying to study, the teacher would she'd glare at you, and that was enough. A glare was enough to silence you. But sometimes the older kids, especially, the hormones would get, and they would be slipping notes to girls and trying to cozy up to girls and things like that. The teacher would then speak very harshly to them, or say you have to stay after school. The very worst thing in the world. There were two intensities there. You had to stay in for recess. That was a real blow to have to stay in for recess. And you have to stay after school. That was even worse, because you couldn't get out. You were dying to talk to your friends, as you walked up the road. That was the worst punishment of all.
But then didn't this teacher have to stay after also if you were going to...
She stayed anyway. The teacher always stayed anyway because she was planning lessons for the next day. Wow. And then the teacher would then go home. Our teachers all... Miss Zimmer lived in Garrison with her father and mother and her little brother, and older brother too. And she drove a Ford, a Model T. She had a Model T.
That must have been amazing.
And she had a fur coat.
Wow.
And the Zimmer family, they were in the upper leaders of the social leaders of Garrison.
So what happened to Miss Zimmer? Did she get married?
Miss Zimmer got married to a guy named Russell Winter. And she could not have children because she had an attack of appendicitis, and they took her to the Vinton Hospital, where the doctor in charge ruined all her insides. So that she could not have children, and she adopted a young man who just not more than 2 weeks ago has contacted me.
Oh, that's amazing!
Miss Zimmer. I took Harry to see Miss Zimmer.
Oh.
And so he got to meet Miss Zimmer. She had blue eyes, and as I said, she was pretty. But the thing that I remember.
Okay, wait. So just for the record, Harry is Millie's
beloved
husband.
Yes.
Beloved husband. But so what did she say to Harry when you how long ago was that?
Oh, this was in I'll tell you how long. 1992, because she died 2 years later. She was 92 at the time,
And what did
And
she
she
say?
died in
What did she say to
1994.
Harry when you met? When she met
Oh,
him?
well, we sat down and started the old chin music, of course.
Chin music?
Reminiscing.
Why is it called chin music?
Chatter. You
Oh.
know?
Okay.
So I took her in to meet Miss Zimmer, and she caught me up on the people who had been there, like Harold and Beverly Moore, that I got to school and I'd lost touch with 50 years ago. Anyway, Miss Zimmer would, before the programs, Halloween, box socials, Christmas, there was another one in the fall. Anyway, she'd take me home with her in her car and wash my hair and set it with this bluish green gelatinous waving lotion.
Like her
And,
permanent.
and she set my hair, cut my hair and set my hair so that I just looked so nice.
Oh, wow.
For the program the next
above and
day.
beyond.
You see, way above and beyond. I can even remember our conversations at that time.
So tell us about one if you really can remember it.
Well, one of the conversations is these teeth had started to erupt high up here, high up in the gum, and I was very self-conscious about it, and I tried not to smile, and she said, "Why do you not smile the way you used to?" And I said, "I'm trying to cover up my teeth." And she said, "You smile." She said, "You got the sweetest smile."
So teachers were also psychologists
Yeah,
and
they were also
morale builders.
psychologists. And then the other thing that Miss Zimmer did that endeared us all was the teacher always had a captain's chair, you know, the wooden captain's chair, and we kids would come in. I swear, the winters in those days, well, just let me give you some statistics. In 1929, from January 1st to almost March 1st, the temperature in Iowa, in Benton County, hovered between 20 above zero and 20 below zero. That's over 60 days.
And you're walking to school.
And we're walking to school in that. Imagine that. And then the snows, the blizzards that we had, and those, Canada, if you look at the map, you'll see why, because there's the plains, and then there's Iowa and Minnesota and Canada, and there's nothing to keep the Arctic air from just pouring down there. Right. And we would walk to school in the snow, and the Schaefers would see us sometimes, and they would call us in and give us cornmeal, which I hated. Give us a slab of fried cornmeal to eat, and put our faces in a basin of snow because they could see we were getting frostbite. And we'd get to school, and then they would send us down to school about a quarter of a mile. And Miss Zimmer would be there with the door, and she would undress us. And that's the first thing you do is put your clothes in the hall, coats in the hall. And then you would go in, and she would put her fur coat in this big chair, and she put the two coldest kids, and we would sit there and unthaw.
Okay, so we're talking about this so many years later, and it's clear that the things that you're remembering, besides the music and the recitation and the kindness of the teacher and the cold and the what
you know something, my fingers are getting cold
just from
that memory.
Well, let's talk about the curriculum.
What?
Reading.
See how this could go easy beyond 2 hours.
Tell us what to start. Reading, writing, arithmetic. Is that true? Is that what you learned? Geography, politics. What were they teaching? What were your lessons like?
Well, why don't I just sort of begin with the beginning of the school day?
Okay.
And let you see what that's like. The first thing you would do when you got in school, take your coats off if you had coats, hang them in the hall. And in this hall, we had a galvanized bucket of water with a bail on it, and under a shelf were cups, and there was one cup for each family. We all drank out of the same cup. And then there was an enamel wash basin on this bench here, right by the water pail, drinking water. And there was an enamel basin with water, and we all washed in the same water and the same soap. And each family had a towel, a hook above. And each family, all four of us, wiped on one towel. And so you can see that the germ theory of the disease was easily just sort of ignored while we were growing up. It was, anything else was too difficult. You'd wash your hands, and you'd put your dinner bucket along the floor, along the wall. That was where the dinner buckets went, all lined up on the floor there. And the first thing we would do, we would pledge allegiance. And let me tell you how I laugh at this. This has been embellished, but I laugh at this. Is pretty much what it was. I led the pigeons to the flag and to the republic for Richard stands, one nation and a dirigible with liberty and justice for all.
Now, were you saying that to be funny, or were you
Oh,
saying that
no,
because
that's what we thought it was. I led the pigeon to the flag is something I saw in a Williams Sapphire, but none of us knew what it meant. Not one of us. But we pledged allegiance with our hand on our heart, and the flag was on the stage. The stage was about 8 inches higher than the rest of the floor.
So you've got this one room. I mean,
yes.
I guess you can't really.
And a big fat pot-bellied stove in the middle.
In the middle. You had a stage on one side, you had a piano.
The stage was at the end of the school.
Okay.
The school is oblong in shape. And then you walk in the front, there's a hall, and then the big school. Mm-hmm. Then there's the stage, and it's raised about 10 inches. And on that is a teacher's desk with the obligatory modesty shield.
Okay, Millie, what's a modesty shield?
It's a desk. The desk is I thought the desk was gigantic. I learned it, and it wasn't that gigantic after I grew up. A big, heavy desk, wooden, solid wood, a kind of like mission furniture, you know, all solid wood. And the teacher, of course, would be with her back to the wall and facing us. And there's a wooden shield over the front so that the boys can't see out the teacher's dress. And that's the modesty shield. That's.
Well, I hope there are some pictures of that in the not seeing up her dress, but seeing the shield. I hope there are some pictures of that in the museum.
I have loads of pictures. Well, they have a desk like that.
Right. Okay.
They have a desk in the.
So did she have lots of drawers in her desk?
She had drawers on 2 sides of the desk, and she wrote with a Schaefer pen that was orange with a black tip.
Wow.
And wow, I loved that pen. I coveted that
So
pen.
she must have an inkwell, right? Was there an inkwell?
And she had an inkwell.
Wow.
And then alongside the desk was about an 8-foot bench that was to sit on. This was the recitation bench.
Right.
And it would be to her, hers was on her left.
Mm-hmm.
As she sat, it was on her left. And it was about 8 inches. And it was about 8 feet long, 6 to 8 feet long. And this was the recitation desk, and the teacher would say, okay, well, the first class, first grade, bring their readers up to the recitation bench, and we trot up to with our little beacon reader, and
okay, so is this a beacon reader?
This is a beacon reader. Yes, this is the second beacon reader.
Okay, so this is the Winston.
Winston and Maltby.
And Maltby. Yes, Winston and Maltby readers by Furman and Maltby. This is the second
That's
reader.
the second grade. That would be the second
It's
grade.
got a rabbit on it.
Uh-huh.
It's got some great illustrations.
Aren't they though?
And Philadelphia, John C. Winston Company, Philadelphia, 1918. And I guess this is shared by many members of your family. Again, it has
easily.
And let's see, what's the first? Oh my goodness, there are a lot of stories about animals. I mean, these may be fables, I guess.
Yes,
or,
yes.
The story of the 3 pigs.
Yes.
Which for Iowa.
What else? What else?
Which for Iowa, the three little pigs grew and grew. At last they were large enough to go away from home, so their mother kissed them goodbye and sent them away. Then the pigs are in a turnip field, then they go to a state fair. Why the lion like the elephant? That's another one. I don't know if you can see the text now, but
I don't remember.
But they look like fables. They really do look like fables. And this was if this was a second grade reader.
This was a second grade reader.
This looks pretty sophisticated for a second grader.
Well,
this looks harder than.
I want to tell you something. I have in here the 8th grade test to get out of country school, and I just thought maybe two things might be interesting.
Sure.
Might be interesting. You really got an education in those. It was a limited education. That is, we had no foreign language. I have a terrible time with foreign language because I never heard of foreign language, and I really. But you really got an education.
Well, this looks sophisticated for, not sophisticated, but harder than what I was doing in second grade. We had our Dick and Jane readers, which probably, I don't know what kids are doing now, but this has got a pretty sophisticated vocabulary here. Boy, from 1918. Now 8th grade, was 8th grade in the one-room schoolhouse?
All 8th grade.
So, okay.
And see this, the people say, should we go back to that kind of an education? Yes and no. I think it's a perfect place to learn. And one of the reasons for that, there are many, many reasons. One is that everybody learns at a different rate. And when you have the people from 1st grade up to 8th grade, and you're in that same room, if I didn't learn my gazintas in the 2nd, say the 3rd grade.
What's a gazinta?
4 gazinta 8.
Okay, that's what they call division.
Yeah.
The gazintas. Okay.
In 4th grade, I would learn it in 5th grade because you would hear them. And this was reinforced, all the learning was reinforced all the way up the line. And then you had this feeling, I never really thought of it until just as I've been thinking about this interview, of how comforting it was to have the older kids instruct me in long division and give history lessons to you really, and then I do the same for somebody else, you see. And I just think that's a fabulous way to learn.
Now, were the older kids family members, or were they friends?
They were, let's see, the Moores, the Helmers, Howard Sjogren, the Selks, So you had a number of families. They were all these different families that lived on the farms, and then you'd all gather at that school.
Let me ask you this, okay? We're sitting here in Palo Alto, where kids are killing each other with competitiveness to get into the Ivy Leagues, where parents are asked to intervene, where social workers are showing up at the schools, where how can we relieve school stress? And here it sounds like the most harmonious, cooperative thing. Why?
I think that's the word. There's just an incredible harmony, and that's because you've got the older people, the older kids looking after the little kids, and the little kids with great respect looking after the big kids.
But why? Why do you think that was? Was it a different time?
I think it's because they were all together and were raised together. See, it's a family in a way, and we had the big family get-togethers. And so that it was just another family at school, and that's the way you felt it was. And that you carried the same respect that you had for your mother and father and grandpa and grandma and your uncles and aunts into the schoolroom and into the classroom.
Okay, so educators and social psychologists are spending millions to try and figure out how to get that back.
They know how to do it, but the thing is that there are limitations, and I think that would be, I would would gladly send my kids up to 8th grade. But then, and also, oh, there was another thing. We didn't have TV, we didn't have radio. We, as I said, we made our own music with papers on combs, with harmonicas, with piano, guitars, fiddles, that kind of thing. But we had nothing coming in from outside. You didn't go to a mall. You didn't, for heaven's sake, stay over at anybody's house. That was just, I stayed over, in the entire 12 years, I stayed over to somebody else's house maybe 3 times in 12 years. You were home. You were expected to be home, in your home. But there was the incredible respect, and harmony is the word to use. There is a harmony in the going to a school like that.
Go.
Okay, so you were going to tell me something more about the quality of the education and the cooperativeness and the harmony between students. And
yes, and it's my thought that that would be a great way to start an education, start students' education. And I say that especially from grades from 1 to 8, because school is such a trauma, and you don't have the most important thing in that way. You don't have a teacher standing up there as if everybody learned the same at the same rate, and she's just what do I want to say?
Reporter.
A reporter to you, to tell you about things. Instead, you've got the students talking to each other, reading to each other. We had flashcards, for instance, and this was the way part of the school would be run. 2 kids, say 2 3rd graders, raise the hand. Incidentally, that's an important thing. How did you get the teacher's attention? You raised your hand. And the teacher would say, can Donald and I do fractions? And then you would get in a big seat with Donald and you would do the fractions. And you would teach each other this way. And that was a great way. The kids taught each other, and they'd be very quiet while they did it, so they didn't disturb. Oh, if you were very, very good and finished early, you got to play in the sandbox and the sand table. The sand table was a real treat. But you had, and I keep using the word harmony because I hadn't thought of it before, but that's what you have. The little ones learning from the big ones, and the big ones feeling good about that, and there's the repetition that you hear over and over, so that when I remember sitting in 4th grade listening to the 8th grade history classes, and history was not my favorite. I didn't like early history, but I liked later history.
why didn't you like early history?
I don't know. I just don't know.
Well,
But-
now during this time you had the Great Depression.
Yes, yes.
And how did that affect what went on in the classroom? Did it affect what went on in the classroom?
Well, it definitely did, because anybody who got a new pair of shoes, they stood out like crazy. Normally you got 1 pair of shoes in the fall, but you went to school barefoot as long as you could. And then only when the cold weather would you put your shoes on. On the kind of food that is, for instance, the Kelly family she had a baby every year. The Kelly family had about 8 kids, and they sometimes would bring nothing but soybeans to school. And that was a big show. And we'd all sort of cut a little bit off our sandwiches and slip them and cut your apple out. Well, I forgot what else we put in there. We put an apple. Frequently we put an apple.
Did you really bring an apple to the teacher?
Yes, we did.
Why? Why would everybody bring?
Or we'd bring a cookie.
What, just to be nice?
Just to be nice. If it was especially pretty. You wouldn't take a Salome apple, or you would take a big red delicious apple, or a big yellow delicious apple, or a big greening apple. But you wouldn't take a Salome or a wealthy apple.
So it had to look good.
It had to look special, and you'd polish it polishing an apple, you polish it on your dress.
The teacher could end up with like 10 apples, right?
No. And then she would eat the apple, and she would cut it and share it too.
Wow.
She would share it.
Well, how do you think that got started, bringing the apple to the teacher?
Somebody looked at an apple and thought of their teacher. And apples in Iowa are so abundant in the fall. Another fruit, incidentally, and this was another on the way home thing. As you walked home, there was a grove of plums, wild plums. They were wild plums, and we would stop and eat about 50 plums apiece, because they just carpeted the ground. They were so sweet and so delicious. They were about the size of a huge olive.
So this is about 4 o'clock?
This is about 4 o'clock.
That's a good snack.
4:30 in the afternoon.
That's it.
4:30. There's something else about the way home that I wanted to mention. When the way home is an hour's talk all by itself, because we little kids very much respected the big kids, and we would walk quite silently most of the time, because we wanted to hear what they had to say, and they would teach us naughty verses, and they would use profanity, which was absolutely forbidden
In school.
And they knew that we all liked to swear because it upset the adults so much. And
but you didn't do it in school?
Oh, never. Because the teacher would probably even put you in the hall for that.
So on your walk home, did you talk about what happened in school?
We talk about what happened in school. We talked, well, for one thing, there was so much wildlife. Sometimes we would catch a snake. We caught blue racers, garter snakes, and there was a little green one, and I don't know what he was. They never had a name.
Now, did
for
they
him.
teach you biology in school? Did they take the lessons of what you were seeing outside?
Absolutely not.
So?
Absolutely not. Sex, I mean, if there's one thing criminal and neglectful, it was the lack of any education. When I got into high school, they started to teach us a little bit, but boy, it was woeful.
So there was no biology at all? I'm not just talking about sex
trying to
education, I'm talking about how the cell worked,
I don't remember.
Because you're farm kids, and yet they didn't talk about that in the classroom.
Well, you got enough of that.
Right.
I'll tell you, I can disjoint a chicken blindfolded, and I can tell you where the gizzard is. I got a huge kick out of my husband, Harry, who was a city boy, who thought the wishbone was in the tail end of the chicken.
Oh.
And I showed him where the wishbone was. That's where the wishbone is.
That's great.
So we had, biology was taught at home, really,
Okay.
in its own way. We were taught health. Health was biology.
And what was that? Being clean?
Being clean primarily, but nobody ever mentioned difference between the sexes.
Okay.
But I must tell you this. We knew there was a difference between the sexes, but girls, I think the boys talked about it a lot more than we did. But we girls would sometimes peek at the boys. I know my sister Avis and I caught my young brother. We knew they had some gubbery between their legs that we didn't have. And we thought we were nice and smooth and pretty down there, but we thought it was awful, because occasionally we'd catch a glimpse, but not ever to see any. But we thought our two brothers, Jack and John, were writing Merry Xmas by peeing in the snow.
This is not at school.
Not at school.
Okay.
That was off beside the chicken.
Okay,
On the
let's go back to school.
Anyway, the sex education was woefully
not happening in school. What about world events? You were on the cusp of World War II. A lot of stuff was happening.
That's
in Europe.
too late. World War II came after I got through high school. Then the stuff too far away from rural school.
Okay.
World events. the only world events were the Depression.
Okay.
We knew about the Depression, and our family was very political, and Grandpa was a raving Franklin D. Roosevelt fan.
No, but in school, did they talk about...
We did not talk about politics in school. We were taught government.
Okay.
You ought to see the test in government here.
Okay, so we're going to do that.
Let's
do that. Millie has an exam. Why don't you explain what you have?
I have the 8th grade State of Iowa Department of Public Education 8th grade examination, and you had to pass this to get out of rural school.
And how did you get a hold of this?
A marvelous gentleman named, I believe, William Sherman, his last name is Sherman. He and his wife have bent their efforts to save rural schools in Iowa, and he contacted me, and then we got to emailing each other, and he sent this to me. I didn't even know about this because I never had to pass this, because
okay.
I was in town school in the spring when this was given.
Okay.
So I never had to pass this at least.
This date is May 1st, 1942. This is the reading comprehension part, and you had some math, and you had a great question about acres and...
Right. I just thought just show you one question.
Sure.
On percentages. This does reading comprehension, vocabulary, spelling, usage, grammar, arithmetic, social studies, geography, science, and health. That's what this consists of. It's, I believe, 18, 19 pages long. But here's a percentage question that I thought might tickle some people. And here's one of the questions, and it's on page 10. And is a farm has 25 acres of pasture, 60 acres of corn, 40 acres of oats, and 15 acres of hay. What percent of the farm is in oats? Figure that out. That's a good question. And that's the level of this test. And I think it's a dandy one. Okay.
Okay, so you talked before, you said this gentleman is trying to preserve rural schools?
Well,
what does that mean?
No, what they wanted to do is preserve, they wanted to get a history of them, is what I should say. And he has a compendium, I'm not sure that, I think his wife also, a compendium of how many schools there were and what the salary was. Did I talk about salary earlier?
Yeah.
Because I think that's interesting. The salary in 1902, I believe, was $30.
So when we talk about, we're going to wrap up. We're going to wrap up now. But
all right. You didn't talk about.
Yeah. Well, if they want more, they'll come back to us, because we could just go on. We could go on forever here. I see another 3 hours. But we're going to wrap up this segment. We may come back and do another thing.
All right.
Okay. So you talk about preserving rural schools, but there's
I think there are no working rural schools in Iowa at this point. And Iowa had more rural schools than I think any state in the nation. I don't even know the number, but I probably could find it in Mr. Sherman's book.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is we're looking, a lot of us are looking at this nostalgically, and I'm wondering if we should do that, or if there's a way to take what we had and bring it into the present.
You know what I think? I think the closest to it is homeschooling.
Okay.
But I do think that I think there's a real advantage. Don't talk economics, the school economics, to having 8 grades in one room. I think there is a huge advantage to that, psychologically, and just the learning. Think of this. In the schools we have today, you've got a teacher standing up in front of the kids as if all kids were created equal, all kids learn at the same level. They don't.
Right.
Holy cow, there was one kid in our class who didn't learn to read. He was in 5th grade. And then he just blossomed.
Wow.
That was Daryl.
That was terrible.
But he suddenly got it.
Wow.
And I think it was the rural school. He may never have learned to read.
Do we know what happened to Gerald? Do we know what profession
Don't
he went to? We don't know.
don't know. But I do know that my mother told me that she did have, as a student, a scholar, the big scholar. What's the big scholar? I can't remember. That goes to England.
Not Fulbright.
Yeah, Fulbright.
Is it a Fulbright?
A Fulbright.
Okay.
She had a student who became
A Fulbright scholar.
Yeah,
that was the error when
era.
Fulbright set it up in Arkansas. Okay, I'm going to end with a quote, and we can come back and do more stuff, but I think we've just got a huge swath of stuff right now. Okay, I'm going to end it with a quote. This is from a man named Wayne Fuller, who wrote a book called One Room Schools of the Middle West. Okay, and I'm just going to read this and then you can respond to it and we'll finish up. And he says, the Midwest's one-room schools were the most democratic in the nation. Located in small independent school districts, they were sustained with the barest of resources by civic-minded farmers who voted taxes, set budgets, built schools, elected school boards, hired teachers, and approved curricula. Their efforts virtually wiped out illiteracy, strengthened their children's devotion to democracy, and opened up new vistas beyond the borders of their lives. As a democratic institution, I never thought of a one-room schoolhouse as an example or a microcosm of democracy. Do you think that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
Let me think.
Was it a democracy?
No.
Okay.
There were democracy in schools and in families did not exist in my day. They would have really laughed, ha ha, if you had said it's a democracy, isn't it? You respected and obeyed your parents. You respected and obeyed your teachers. You respected and obeyed any elder, all elders. I don't care who it was. You respected them, and their say went. And it was really, don't do as I say, or don't do as I do, you do as I say.
Okay, so it wasn't a democracy for the kids.
No way.
For the people that set up the school system, the farmers, the teachers, the school board, was that a democracy?
That was a democracy. That was a democracy. They would vote for school boards. You would run for school board. I mean, you really would. You'd take your team and you'd go and knock on doors. Grandpa was president of the school board of Monroe Township at one time. He raised teacher salaries. Of course, his 2 daughters were teachers, but he did see that the teachers got a little higher pay. But I would not call the schools nor the families democratic in those days.
Okay. Now, he also says it opened up new vistas beyond the borders of your lives. Did it open up new vistas? It sounds like the wildlife. It sounds like the walks to and from opened up the vistas. But did what happened in the schoolroom open up new vistas?
I would reiterate that the walks to school were as important as the school day. And I cannot dwell enough on that because when I think of the nature education I got, it was amazing. And what I learned, now tell me the question again.
But he's saying that these one-room schools opened up new vistas beyond the borders of your lives.
Yes, because first of all, music. And then the history lessons and the geography lessons that we had. And just meeting people. See, you didn't have a chance on the farm to meet very many people. But you did in school, and I think that that's true. And of course, I loved stories and I loved English, and that launched me into my career as an English teacher, because and you know, Emily Dickinson said, there is no frigate like a book to take us lands away. And she's right. And that's where that opens your horizons. Learning to read is opening up your horizons.
So I have one final question
Okay.
for this segment.
Okay.
You were a teacher and a
Yes.
professor.
Yes.
What that you learned in the one-room schoolhouse? What techniques? What characters of the teachers you admired? What qualities of education did you bring to your own work, even decades later?
Never even thought of that very much. But I guess it was the fact to realize that the kids were real people, realizing that the kids were human beings, for one thing. And also to be one with them. That's what we learned in country school, that you were not better. No one was better than anybody else in country school. And that may have been why this person called it a democracy. In that way, it was a democracy, but the teacher called the shots at all times. And a look, or just would bring everybody to attention. Oh, one thing you didn't do, talk about how you ended.
Okay. How you ended? You mean how you ended the school day?
How you ended the school day.
Okay.
And in our school, that was ritual. She would say, "Okay, students, put your books away, and you get all of that, and stand by your desk." And we'd all stand there, and then we would sing, "Work for the night is coming," and now the day is over. And we did that every single day through 8th grade. Yeah. Sing those 2 songs. And that was it.
Do you want to give us some lyrics? You know,
I wrote them down because I was afraid I couldn't remember them if I got, let's see if I can find them. I know there were very few of us who were very good singers. And we would start with "Work for the Night is Coming." I must have put, what would I have done?
Okay, it might even be in Little Heathens, but let's see, and then we'll call it. Yes, here it is, Lily.
I don't think I can read it.
Okay, I'll read it.
All right. Okay.
And see if you can, and then we're done.
starting with
"Work for the night is coming.
Night is drawing nigh. Shadows of the evenings peel across the sky. Work through the morning dark.
Well, the night is darkening.
Darkening. Work mid.
Here, we'll do it. "Work for the night is coming, under the sunset skies, while their bright tints are glowing. Work for the daylight flies." Daylight dies, daylight flies. "Work till the last beam fadeth to shine no more.
Work for the night is coming, when man works no more." And then now the day is over, night is drawing nigh, shadows of the evenings peel across the sky. And we sang that every single day after.